knew very little about the secret societies even when I was a student. But I would agree that if that had happened, that would be a fair characterization of the significance of it.
And then, let's see, so you graduated in '69.
Correct.
And where did your interest in law?
My interest in law came from the fact that when I was 3, my father had a flare-up with ileitis, my mother and he went to Florida. My brother lived with a neighbor for a few days, and I went to my Uncle Sam's, my mother's brother's, in Paterson, New Jersey. My Uncle Sam was a litigator. I didn't know what that meant at age 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or whatever. But at age 3, my Uncle Sam was a litigator, and that's what I wanted to be. And I never deviated, ever, from being a lawyer, except for a momentary flirtation with being a garbage man at age 6 or 7 on the theory that everyone's got garbage. So, but other than that flirtation, as my mother told me, there was never any thought about being anything other than an attorney.
And how did you pursue that? Did you apply to law school directly after you?
When I was at senior year, I applied to law school, and I was accepted at Columbia and at Penn. And then I matriculated at Columbia Law School in September 1969. And found the experience to be colossally different than the Yale experience, partially because it was graduate school and partially because it was Columbia, which I think itself is a rather cold place. But I didn't deviate, went right into it. And then on I graduated on, when I was the day before my 24th birthday in June of 1972, June 6, 72, and then July 5th of 72, I worked for Davis Polk & Wardwell, commenced an association with that law firm, a large Wall Street law firm. So this Friday will be 30 years since I began working as an attorney. I missed only one day because of illness. And then
pretty incredible.
I've been sick, fair enough, here and there, but I usually work when I'm ill.
And you didn't begin in family law in the beginning, did you?
No, I started out in an area called trusts and estates. And on the theory that as law firms went, large Wall Street law firms, that would be the most personal area. What I learned over the next 5 or 6, 7 years was that that might be true on the one hand, but on the other hand, it was still an impersonal area because the bulk of the work related to taxes and financial matters. And very infrequently, as an associate, did one actually work with the clients on a personal basis. So as a consequence, the experience left me rather cold. And as I started to think about what would be rewarding for me, I thought I would like to litigate. I would still like to do work in the area of taxation to an extent. I would like to draft documents. But most importantly, I would like to work with individuals on personal issues. And then it became clear to me one day that family law would be the area for me where I could do all of that. So on January 1, 1980, I simply changed courses rather dramatically and just literally opened up an office in Manhattan, never having taken a deposition, let alone tried a case. And I declared myself that I would, to the world as a person who was now going to be concentrating in family law, having had no prior experience, no mentors, no background, no cases that I had worked on, and just contacts I'd had with other trust and estates lawyers in the city whom I thought might be able to refer me cases here and there, and then I would just build on my own through developing a reputation, and that's what I set out to do.
And kind of, who were some of your first clients, and how did you find them?
Well, one of the first clients was a telephone operator from Davis Polk & Wardwell, so that was number one. And interestingly enough, about a month later, the chairman of the board of Nabisco, Davis Polk line, came in to see me, and he has always loved the story, and I've always loved the story because it showed that one has to be true to oneself, and I always am. He came in, he had a prenuptial agreement that was ironclad, and he was told that the agreement was ironclad, and thus no lawyer, including someone like myself with no experience, could possibly cause him not to win the case. And that he had started as an office boy at Nabisco years early when he was 16, and that he rose through the ranks, and he would take pleasure in trying to jumpstart my career by enabling me to say one of my clients was the chairman of the board of Nabisco, and I would win the case. And he left me a large retainer check, and left feeling very good about himself. And I sort of chased him down the hallway and asked him to come back in. And I said, you've been very decent to me and very gracious, but you've not permitted me to ask some of the questions I would like to ask. And he said, okay. And I said, do you have a few moments? He said, yes. And I asked him how much income he earned, and he told me, which was a very substantial amount. I asked him whether he had a principal residence. He said yes. And a vacation home. He said yes. And I asked him his feelings towards his wife, notwithstanding the unhappiness which was leading to a divorce, because there was a prenuptial agreement in effect that dictated what the result would be. And he said he basically did not have any harsh feelings. In fact, she was the sister of his former wife who had died after 35 years of marriage. He and his sister-in-law became friendly after the funeral, and one thing led to the next. But the relationship just didn't work. And I asked him if he had a lady friend, and he said yes. And I asked him whether the lady friend's relationship with him somehow was impaired by reason of his position as the chairman of the board of Nabisco. And he said food business is rather conservative. And he said yes, when I go on conventions, it's a little bit tricky. And I asked him whether he was contemplating marriage. He said he thought it was more likely than not. And then he said, why are you asking me all these questions? And I said, because I think the question you should have asked me is not, will I win the case, and how much will it cost, and how long will it take, et cetera, but rather, how much money do you think I should offer my wife above and beyond what the agreement calls for, so that in 1 minute the matter is resolved, with her life being better, with my holding my head up high, and getting on with life, and being able to be with my lady friend and marrying her, because money doesn't matter that much, relatively speaking, given his economics. And he also made one thing very clear: he did not hate his wife at all. So he said to me, none of the other lawyers I interviewed asked me any of those questions. And I said, because none of them cared about you, or about your wife, or about how your life should be, and how her life should be. And this is still the sister of your former wife, whom you love dearly. And, I said, for all these reasons, don't you agree with me? You should offer a substantial amount in excess, as long as it doesn't impact you in a significant way, and have her say thank you, and end it. And I said, so I asked him if he could take back his retainer check. And I said, because if you listen to me, you won't need a retainer check. The matter will be over in a couple of hours. And it was. And at the time, he paid me, I think, a $5,000 fee, which was substantially in excess of what the time was, because I was working on a time basis. But it was one of my first experiences, and it was a good test, because it wasn't something that was anything other than my natural response to what I was being told. I just like to do the right thing. I instinctively, see things in that kind of a way, and I still do. 20 some odd years later, that was 1980, I still use that, my instincts, my gut, my menschiness, I think I like to call it, as the way I try to navigate through cases for people and make their lives better, and make them happier, and try to appeal to their best feelings, not the worst. Because in this area, family law, if you appeal to the worst, you'll find it very easily. And that's what a lot of lawyers do to tap into money, is to, of course, take a case that could be settled and make it a case that has to be tried.
If you started in 1980, you must have kind of really hit this unfortunate crest in a wave of divorces. I don't know when people really started talking about this kind of American divorce crisis, but probably it was sometime after that. So I'm just curious, as someone who's had so much experience with family law and with this world of sometimes really unfortunate and painful separations, just, where do you think the country's headed? And it sounds like, if I remember correctly, the percentage of marriages that end in divorce has plateaued. Why do you think that is? And what do you think the future, what lies in the future in terms of marriage in this country?
I don't purport to have an answer, or even, some terribly creative thoughts about the issue, except I do know something that people don't talk about often. And if I ever were to give a lecture or to write something, it would be more along the lines of what to think about and what to look for before getting married. I think most marriages break down for a variety of reasons, which could include things that cannot be anticipated. But a very substantial number of marriages break down because the parties really weren't suited for each other from a psychiatric viewpoint from the get-go, notwithstanding love. And I think most people don't understand that personalities are formed at a very early age, and if you are an obsessive-compulsive person and you fall in love with a histrionic person, and you are never going to be able to fulfill that histrionic person's sense of what love should be. A true histrionic will want to be hugged and kissed and loved and nurtured, and will have no appreciation or interest in facts. It's a feeling of Prince Charming will come along and everything will be okay. Just want to be happy, just want you to love you, just want to love you, just want to be loved. The obsessive compulsive lives in a world of facts. It's not living in a dreamy state. Everything's very precise. It's black and white. It's critical views. It's being judgmental. It's being moralistic. It's being precise. It's being perfectionistic. It's being on time. These are qualities that are integral to the personality of the obsessive compulsive, most of which are extremely favorable characteristics.